Hey guys, HackerSploit here, back again with another video, and welcome back to the Penetration Testing Bootcamp. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at Windows penetration testing and privilege escalation. So the objective of this video is to introduce you and familiarize you with the methodology behind, performing a pen test on a Windows on a Windows target. And we're going to be exploring the various ways of gaining access firstly, but I really want to focus on what happens after you've gained initial access and how to enumerate information from the target system, so on and so forth. Now, for the purpose of this video, I'm going to be using the Metasploitable 3 virtual machine. Again, this video is not going to be focused on getting the flags, or in this particular case, the cards. We are only interested in getting, full administrative access on the target system, so NT authority privileges, right? So that's our objective, and we're going to gather as much information as possible. Now, the reason I've decided to use Metasploitable 3 is primarily because it offers, or it provides us with a robust environment to work in, and in my opinion, provides users with a good understanding of how a Windows server is typically set up. So it has tons of services running on it, and there's multiple ways of gaining access and of elevating your privileges, if I can actually use that word. Without saying anything else, let's get started. So the first step, as you know, is going to involve scanning, right? And there's multiple ways you can go about performing your scans. And again, you'll typically be using Nmap, and you may also be dealing with a firewall. So there's tons of stuff you need to be considering. Now, in my particular case, I already have the results saved out, and we'll just go through them. As I said, this video is not going to be focused on finding flags. We're going to be trying to get access as quickly as possible, so we're going for the low-hanging fruit, right? So in my particular case, you can see my Nmap scan here. If you want to learn more about Nmap, you can check out our Nmap series. It's within the Penetration Testing Bootcamp playlist. So for the services, we can see that we have FTP running on port 21, as well as OpenSSH. Now remember, this is a Windows system, so if we quickly take a glance at the operating system detection here, we can see that we're pretty much guaranteed to be running Windows Server 2008 R2 to 2012. All right, so we have an idea of what we're dealing with. We're dealing with Windows Server as opposed to standard Windows desktop installation. We also have a web server that's running the Microsoft IIS. It's running on Microsoft IIS, which is the default Microsoft web server right over there. And we also have MSRPC, and we also have SMB running, as well as a MySQL server. Now, the MySQL server and the MySQL info Nmap script provides us with more information regarding the actual server version and any of the other capabilities that it could actually enumerate. So in our particular case, we're going to be looking for interesting capabilities, but we will get to MySQL when we reach there. However, we can actually see that the auth plugin name that's being used is MySQL native password, which doesn't give us an idea of the hashing algorithm being used, but we'll get to that when we get there. We also discover a service running on port 3389, which is RDP, or the Remote Desktop Protocol, which allows us to access computers remotely, or just get a live desktop session remotely, either on the same network or on an external network. We also have a few other services running here, but one of the interesting ones that I wanted to point out here is, if I can just find it right over here. Well, it doesn't actually give us the banner, but we'll take a look at them as we move along. All right, so the first thing that I want to cover is something called banner grabbing. Now, whenever you're dealing with a service like this one here, where it doesn't give you a full banner or version numbers, then in that case, you really should be using something like Netcat, right? And I can just type in the IP here, and I provide the port, and I hit enter, and you can see it tells us it's Microsoft FTP service. Now, it may be a little bit more difficult to enumerate more information from this, especially given the various versions that exist on the various server stacks. If we do this with port 22 for SSH, we should see the exact version which we were already able to get, which is exactly what Nmap did. But if you're not getting the service versions, or you're not familiar with what a service is, like for example, if we take a look at a service that is, we can't really recognize, like 4848, which tells us it's SSL app serve HTTP with, with a question mark, so it's not really sure. What we can do is run that on port 4848, which I think requires SSL, but we can just test it out just to see what's going on there. So we don't get anything back, which is understandable given the fact that it requires SSL, but you get the idea, right? So we also have a Glassfish server. We also have a Glassfish server running, which actually gives us the version number, which is 4.0. And let's see what else we have here. And we have various other services running, which are providing, some sort of services or are hosting some sort of services. We also have Apache running, which is on port 8383. So we can actually explore some of these. So I'm just going to open up my browser here, and we'll say 10.10.10.11. That's the IP it's being hosted on. And this is the initial, this is the web server being hosted right over here on port 80, and it's Microsoft IIS 7.5. If we view the source here, we can see that we get a value here, which we have already gone through this, I think, before. And this value is essentially base64 code that when decoded will give us the content, the file content of a PNG or a JPG file, which is a flag. As I said, we're not going through that. We're primarily interested in getting initial access, right? So if we try and enumerate more information from some of the other services that are running, for example, on port, let's see, port 8022, let's try and access and let's see what's running on that. So 8022, we can see we have a Manage Engine Desktop Central 9 server running. So Desktop Central, as far as I remember, allows you to manage a large amount of desktop and computers remotely. So, it's a really great tool for administrators on a large network, and if they're providing support and managing these computers, this can be facilitated through Desktop Central. So we can perform some enumeration regarding vulnerabilities for Desktop Central version 9. So we can use SearchSploit. So SearchSploit, and we just say Desktop Central, and we hit enter. And we have what it looks like right over here. We have a vulnerability and a Metasploit module, right? We also have the arbitrary file upload vulnerability, which is also a Metasploit module. However, the one we're interested in is for the version 9 here. So we can test this out right over here. So what we'll do is we'll just fire up Metasploit or the Metasploit console, and we'll try and test that and see whether that works out. All right, so excellent. So that's one service that we have running there. We also have a service running on port 8031, which also requires an SSL certificate or is using HTTPS. So 8031, my bad, that is an incorrect URL right over there. So 8031, and it's not working. If we provide HTTPS, let's see if that works out. Yeah, that doesn't give us anything there. So it looks like this certificate isn't working or has expired, which is to be expected. We also have a Glassfish server, as I said, running, which is on port 8080. We can also check that out as well. We hit enter, and I think that does not require that. So you can see we have the Glassfish server running there, which is great. We also have another service running on port 8181 and 8383, which I think we already explored. We also have 8443. So let's try out that one first. 8443. And that isn't working, right? Let's try and access that on SSL. Yeah, that doesn't work as well. All right, so we can't access any of those other services. We also have another service running on port 9200, and then Microsoft RPC, Microsoft Windows RPC running on the rest of the ports. And in this particular case, we can see that from the WSP service, we get what seems to be an API that provides us with various details here, or just a public-facing service. We can actually try and explore it manually. So port 9200. Yeah, so it just gives us the status or information pertaining to a particular service and the build hash. So let's actually take a look at Metasploit here. And what we'll do is we will search for Desktop Central. So Desktop Central, and we can do a bit more research on the particular exploit that we're using, which in this case is going to be the file upload file upload servlet connection ID module, which we can actually try and locate here. So file upload, is that the one here? Desktop Central, I think agent upload, no, that's not the one. File upload servlet, this is the one right over here. All right, so we'll use this particular module, and no payload is configured. I'm just going to set the payload to Windows x64 interpreter based on the target architecture, right? In most cases, Windows Server is going to be running on a 64-bit. It's better to actually set the payload now, so that we don't have to migrate and do it, or to actually get a 64-bit interpreter session after the fact. So show options. We can see we need to set the R hosts, and this is for Desktop Central, which I believe was running on port. Let's see if we can actually find it here, because I don't remember the exact port. So 8022, right? So we set R hosts to 10.10.10.11, and then we set R port to 8022, right? And the target URI, I believe, is fine, and we also have the payload options, which are set correctly, I believe. If I can just check that one more time, just to make sure my IP address is correct. That is correct. So I think this should be fine. So let's hit run, and let's see whether we're able to get a interpreter session. All right, so it's executing the stager, and it deleted or performed a cleanup of the actual JSP file that was uploaded. And if we actually list out the system information here, we can see we're running on Windows 2008 R2 6.1 build 7601 service pack 1. All right, the architecture is x64, and we have an x64 interpreter session, or a 64-bit interpreter session. All right, so I'm just going to clear this out, and the first thing we want to do is perform a little bit of local enumeration, right? And of course, I'm guessing, I'm not really sure what our privileges are. You can see our privileges are NT authority. However, that might be something you might get confused with. NT authority system is where we have control over the entire system. NT authority local service means we have essentially NT authority over a particular service. In this particular case, it's going to be the Desktop Central service that's running, right, or the Desktop Central server. So we can actually confirm this. If I list out if I type in the get privs command here, you can see that the various access tokens that we have sort of tell us what we can and cannot do on the system. So we can see we have SC assigned primary token privilege, which means we can perform some impersonation attacks, but we'll get to that. We also have the SC impersonate privilege, which is great. It means that if we can list out the various other access tokens on the system, we can impersonate them to elevate our privileges that way, because we currently are not in an elevated state, although that may seem like the case. Right, so we also have a few other access tokens here. So set the time zone privilege. So these are just basic access tokens that sort of control what user has access to what, and that's what access tokens are used for on Windows, right? So we can explore various ways of elevating our privileges. The first thing we need to do is, again, is to perform some local enumeration. So I'll just get a shell session. So we have access on the shell here, and I'll just move into the C drive, or the root of the C drive, and we can list out the directories here. So we have the Glassfish server, we have the flags here, which, as I said, we're not really interested in. We have inetpub, which is Microsoft IIS, the web directory. We also have WAMP, a WAMP stack installed, which is interesting. And yeah, so let's perform some enumeration. First thing we want to do, if we want to learn more about the system, is we type in system info, right? So system info will give us essentially a rundown of the system and how it's configured. So for example, we have the host name, the operating system name, the version. But when it comes down to privilege escalation, what you're going to be looking for are the hotfixes installed. And the hotfixes installed will give you an idea of what kernel level exploits or kernel exploits you can run against this target successfully. So if a kernel exploit has been patched, it's going to have a hotfix code or a hotfix ID. And these IDs can help you determine what exploit to use and what exploit not to use, right? So that's what you can use this for. The other thing we want to do is we can use the net user command, right? So the net user command will essentially list out all the users on the system. In this case, we can see we have various users, user accounts that are attributed to Star Wars. So you have Chewbacca, and you have the Skywalker, etc. Right? So it's been configured that way. We also have the administrator account, right, which is where we want to get essentially. We also have the vagrant user, which is sort of the default user on the system. We can also list out the privileges that we have, as I said, similar to what we did with within Meterpreter. So if we list this out, this will give us the access tokens that our current account has access to, and the description of what this particular access token does. So in our case, as I said, we're interested primarily in SC impersonate privilege, which allows us to impersonate a client after authentication, right? And we can get more information about various groups on the system. So who am I groups? And this will list out all the groups. So you can see we have NT authority, authenticated users, this organization service for the services, right? So on and so forth. And we also have the some of the default groups enabled over there. If we list out the host names or the host name of the machine, that again gives us an idea of what we're dealing with in terms of the host name. And if we want to list out a list of tasks running within a shell as opposed to a Meterpreter session, we can do this using the svc command, right? So if I hit enter, so task list svc, this gives us the various tasks and the process IDs here, and this can be very helpful in determining what service to migrate to, or if a kernel exploit or an exploit utilizes a particular service and starts up or actually utilizes a particular exe here. It also gives us an understanding of what's running on the server at this very moment, and we can see all the services that are running. We have a PostgreSQL database, for example. We also have Tomcat 8 running, which I believe I saw, but we will take a look at that shortly. All right. Now, when it comes down to privilege escalation, as I said, manual enumeration is great, but in most cases, you typically want to use an automated script that will enumerate important information in the context of privilege escalation, and that will give you an idea of what exploits you can use to elevate your privileges. Now, a great tool that I like using and that works consistently for me is the Windows Exploit Suggester, right? And you can just perform a quick Google search on this, and I'll just open this up, and yeah, this is the actual script. So this script works really simply. I'll actually show you how to use it right now. It's a Python script. You do need to have Python 2 installed, and these various dependencies installed. I think I already have it on my system here. So let me just Windows enum and Windows Exploit Suggester. There we are. So the way this tool works is you need to first of all run the script with the update flag, and once you click on update, it's going to generate an XLSX or a spreadsheet file that contains a list of vulnerabilities. So that's your database, right? So that's what you're going to be using to scan vulnerabilities for based on the system information. The next thing you need to do is you need to create a file containing the system information of your target system. So the way you do this is you just type in system info, and you then want to copy all of this information here from the command system info, and you want to save this in a file. I'll just save it right now, right in front of you guys. So there we are, and I'll save this as we'll go into my desktop and Windows enum, Windows Exploit Suggester, and I'll just call this ms3.txt, right? So that's the system information for the Metasploitable 3 system. Okay, and then you just need to provide the following flag. So you specify the database and then the system info file, and then it's going to scan the system information and give you an idea of what exploits you can actually use to elevate your privileges, right? So we can do that right now. So I'm just going to run the Windows Exploit Suggester script and then specify the database, which in my case is right over here. So 2021, I recommend updating it as frequently as possible. And then we type in system info and ms3.txt. You're going to run that, and it's going to give us a list of all the latest exploits. The reason I've not updated my database is because we're targeting Windows Server 2008, and there aren't any new vulnerabilities that we can potentially use. So the script will give us a list of all vulnerabilities or all potential exploits that we can use that this server might be vulnerable to. And the ones sorted at the top here are pretty much going to be your best bet. So for example, you can see we have MS16. It gives us the CVE here. So MS16 135 security update for Windows kernel. It gives us the hotfix ID and the Microsoft reference to this particular exploit. And then it gives us the exploit DB links, as well as the GitHub repository to where you can find the exploit code that you can download, compile, and then run on the target, right? So when it comes down to kernel level exploits, it's pretty much going to be a case of trial and error, right? And in our particular case, we can use any one of these and run tests on it. And for example, we have MS16 032. You can perform a bit more research on these exploits. So for example, MS16 032, and this will, just performing research on exploit will tell you exactly what this exploit is used for, right? So in our particular case here, we have the Rapid7 link, which pretty much means we have a Metasploit module associated with it. So there we are. So this module exploits the lack of sanitization of standard handles in the Windows secondary logon service. The vulnerability is known to affect versions of Windows 7 to 10 and Windows Server 2008 to 2012, 32-bit and 64-bit. All right, and it's only going to work on versions of Windows with PowerShell version 2 and later, and systems with 2 or more CPU cores. So that's important information that you need to take into consideration here. Now, given the fact that we already have the module here, we can try it out. It might not work, but we can try out and we can actually try it and see whether it works. All right, so I'll just exit from this, and it's going to take me back into my interpreter session. I'll just put this in the background. There we are, and I can list out my sessions like so, and then I can just say, use, put in the exploit name there, and then we want to set the payload. So set payload, this is very important, x64, and then interpreter, and then reverse TCP, right? And we then want to show the options, and we simply need to set the session ID right over here. And because our current interpreter session is running on port 4444, we also need to change that. So let's set the session to 1, and then we set the L port, to something like 1234, just something basic. Of course, this is a very simple scenario. And then I hit run, and it's going to start it. And let's see whether we get a interpreter session back, right? So it looks like the exploit is run. All right, there we go. And it's going to sniff out a system shell, and it tells us holy handle leak Batman. We have a system shell, and it's executed on the target system. Let's see whether we get anything in response or any interpreter session, because we set the payload options there. So what it does is it writes a payload into a PowerShell script under the temp directory there. It's going to execute the exploit script. The operating system core count is as required, and then it's going to sniff out a privileged impersonation token. In this particular case, you can see that this is a token impersonation attack, and it gives us it says duplicating system token, and then starting token race, starting the process race, holy handle. So what I'm guessing, if we go into the first session and then we say get privs, we can see that our privs haven't changed, but I'm guessing that this exploit actually gives us a system impersonation token. So that means we can perform an impersonation attack here. And now it might not seem that way, but what it's done is it's actually given us an access token that we can impersonate to get NT authority system privileges. Because right now you can see we have very, very few access tokens or privileges assigned to our account. So to do this, we're going to need to leverage a tool, a built-in interpreter tool called incognito, right? So load incognito. and it's going to work. There we are. And then we can list out the various tokens that we have and the appropriate users. And you can see we don't have any tokens, which is again why I was a bit confused as to how this particular exploit worked. And in this particular case, the only delegation tokens we don't have any impersonation tokens. We only have the NT authority local service, which is fine. So that means we need to do a little bit more stuff, you know, to actually get to actually elevate our privileges. So let's take a look at our exploits again. We also have the MS16 075, which is the hot potato attack here, which we can actually learn more about. It's hot potato attack. I'll just open this right over here. So rotten potato, I think that is an updated version of this. So local privilege escalation from Windows service accounts to system, right? So this is typically again going to require, or is actually going to give us an access token, a privileged access token that we can use, and then we can impersonate it. So to run this, we simply need to get the URL. You can also compile it if you want yourself, which is actually recommended. So I'm just going to download this script, or not the script, the actual binary right over here. So we've downloaded that, and we can upload it to the target using Meterpreter. So on my current working directory, let me just go back into my C drive, and I'll just save it right over here, you know, because why not? So downloads, and we're rottenpotato.exe, so that is denied. So you can see that even though we have NT authority privileges, we can't actually we can actually make, or we can modify, create, or delete files if we don't have the ability to do that, right? So that pretty much means if we head over to our home directory, you can see it's not going to find that, which is understandable again. So if we go into the, let's see if we can actually access the users directory. Sorry, cd users. There we are. And, you know, we can try and access the vagrant user. There we are. And if we try and upload the file again, you can see access is denied. Get user ID, again, same thing right over there. So we pretty much, I'm guessing, need to go into the manage engine directory. So let me just take a step back there. There we are. And we go into the manage engine directory and cd desktop central. There we are. And probably try and upload it here, because these are the permissions that we currently have. There we are. Looks like that worked out. And then to run it, we simply type in rottenpotato.exe, right? And for some reason, well, actually should do this in a shell session, my bad. And it got the actual access token here. So I'll probably be making a video that covers exactly how hot potato attacks work. It essentially involves performing a man-in-the-middle attack on NTLM authentication, and then intercepting the NTLM token, and then using that token or using that particular privilege token to complete authentication. As I said, I'll probably be making a video on that explains that process, because hot potato attacks can be really powerful, and you know, elevating your privileges through token impersonation also works really well. All right, so we should have an access token now. Again, I'm not really sure. Let's actually take a look at how this exploit works, although I should have done that before. New version is Rotten Potato NG, which again works well. I have used Rotten Potato, this binary right over here, which works well. So compile, get an interpreter session, run the binary from step 2, and then impersonate the token. Right, so we have already loaded that. So I'm just gonna see whether we have any tokens. So, you know, we'll go into interpreter session and then list tokens, and we can hit enter, and we do have the impersonation token now. So to elevate our privileges, all we need to do now is say impersonate token, and we'll put this in quotation marks, and we have successfully impersonated NT authority system. If I type in get privs, it's still telling us we still have those particular privs. But if I say get use ID, we now have NT authority system, and we can actually try and access the, let's see if we can actually do that. So cd users, cd administrator, there we are. And we can access the administrator, the actual administrator directory, or the actual home directory for the administrator user. So we've elevated our privileges using token impersonation. As I said, there's multiple ways you can go about performing privilege escalation, and there's multiple scripts you can use to perform local system enumeration, like for example WinPs or the Windows privilege escalation script, which works really well. But let's talk about a little bit more about getting more of more control over a system, because we actually saw that we had really cool services on the system running, like MySQL. And if we go back into our C directory right over here, you can see that we have the WAMP directory here, right? So let's try and access and see what's going on within the WAMP directory. All right, so within the WAMP directory, we'll just get into a shell session just so that we can see what's going on. We have the local, this is the web root. So let's try and access the web root first. We can see that we have a meterpreter.php session there, which is really interesting, although I did not expect that to be the case. We don't have, we also have a uploads directory, nothing else. Yeah, all right, so let's check out the other directories here. We have an apps directory. What we have in here, we have phpMyAdmin, SQL Buddy, and WebGrind. Let's see what else we have running here. I'll just get into my meterpreter session. Let's check out the folders within the uploads directory. Oh, we also have a WordPress directory, which is weird because I did not see that. Let's check out the WordPress directory. Right, so we have WordPress. We can pretty much get the contents or the credentials for logging in to the MySQL database. So those are usually stored in WordPress config.php, and because we already have access, it's going to be pretty straightforward. So we cap the contents there, and it should give us the credentials here. So MySQL database username is root and the password is null, which is again we need to understand that this target is designed to be vulnerable, but again, there's no way of knowing that, although you might have been lucky if you provided a null password anyway. So we can try and log in remotely. Root and the password we will specify on our own. The remote host is 10.10.10.11. We hit enter and we have access to the MySQL database. All right, and show databases, and looks like we have a WordPress database, cards, MySQL, etc. And we now have access, as I said, to the WordPress database. And if we use MySQL show tables, there we are, and we can pretty much select from user to see what other users we have, and it looks like it's listing it out in this weird way, which again, it should actually, we only have one user, so there we are, that's the root user. And they don't have, we don't need to change the password because the password is set to null. We can also create new users, so on and so forth. So we've been able to get more control over the target by taking over the database. What else can we do? Well, the other thing we can do is try and crack the user password. So if I type in hash dump in the meterpreter session, you can see it gives us all the various hashes for the users on the system. Now, of course, in most cases, the users that we're going to be interested in getting are going to be the administrator and any other privileged user. So I'll copy this and I'll show you how to crack this hash using John the Ripper. Now, another interesting thing is if before we elevated our privileges, we could have actually used this particular hash for the admin user and performed a pass the hash attack through SMB using the ps exec utility. And I'll show you how to do that right now. But let me show you how to crack this password first, because I believe we can actually log in using RDP if we crack this hash. So I'll just open up another terminal session here. We'll just exit from the MySQL database, and I'll just head over to my desktop, and we'll just say hash.txt, create a new file, paste in the hash there. Well, I actually need to paste in the entire hash. Let me just copy the entire hash. Where is it? It should be here. There we are, because we need it when cracking. There we are. And I'll paste that in there. Fantastic. So in cracking Windows hashes, we say sudo john, and then the format is going to be NT because these are NTLM hashes. I again will be making a video explaining the difference between landman hashes and NTLM hashes, and explaining how NTLM hashes are structured. So for example, the SID, the identifier, it's similar to Linux, is 500. Now, whenever you get an SID with 500, that pretty much means that this is the administrator user. So again, I'll be making videos that cover this and this entire process. And then hash.txt, and I hit enter, and that's going to begin the cracking password. Well, it actually looks like I've cracked that before. So what I'll do is I'll just get rid of the John, of my John cache. Well, not my cache, but the previous hashes that I have there, and I'll just rerun the command again. All right, so I cleared out my previous hashes that I'd cracked, and I ran the command again, and we're able to find the administrator password within a fairly short amount of time. And again, I used a word list, the default word list used by John, which is under user share John password.list, and the password for the administrator is vagrant, which again is fairly simple. But again, I'll show you how to in the event you don't have a or you're not able to crack the actual NTLM hash, how to use that hash to elevate your privileges manually, right, using the pass the hash attack. All right, so we can pretty much log in using Remainer now, or an RDP protocol of your RDP client of your choice. So 10.10.10.11, and the username is administrator. The password is vagrant. We don't have a domain. Hit OK. We should be able to log in remotely. There we are, Windows Server 2008 R2, and yeah. Pretty much it. We now have access, remote access to the NT Authority user account, or the administrator account rather, my bad. And we can confirm this. If I open up the start menu, you can see administrator right over there, and that's done. All right, so let's talk about the pass the hash attack. So all you need to do is really just copy the hash as so. You're only copying the contents of the hash, so the NTLM hash itself, and you're excluding the username and the SID. The SID or the RID, I can't really remember. I'll probably need to clarify on that. But as I said, I'll be making videos on this. That being said, we'll just put this in the background. There we are. And we will search for the PS-exec exploit here, which is a post-exploitation module. There we are. It looks like this is the one. So exploit Windows SMB PS-exec. So Microsoft Windows authenticated user code execution. So again, it uses the hash, or it passes along the hash and authenticates using the hash, as opposed to using a password, and gives us access and a interpreter session. So we'll copy that, and we'll say use, put that in there, and again set the payload to Windows x64 interpreter first TCP show options, and we'll set the L port to 443 like so, and we then need to set the R host, which is 10.10.10.11, and we then need to set the actual SMB user and the SMB pass. So we set SMB user to administrator. Right, that is correct. And then we set the SMB password, which we're providing in hash format. And let's actually copy that. Did I actually copy that? There we are. That's the one right over here. And we copy that, and we just provide that value there, and that is set correctly. And if there is a domain, you can specify that as well as the share to connect to, if that is required. And let me just confirm the options are set correctly. Everything looks fine. So I'll just hit run. And it looks like it's working. It will authenticate successfully, and we get a second Meterpreter session. And if I type in get user ID or NT authority system, and if I list out my privileges, which is really weird, there we are. So now we've correctly elevated our privileges, and we can pretty much do whatever we want. Because again, we have authenticated, we have actually authenticated successfully, and we've performed, we haven't really exploited anything. The only thing we've done is, authenticated, and then we have a payload sent, and then that payload is executed using the authenticated credentials, and we now have stable access. So yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to cover in this video. Just wanted to have a, just a normal, really roughly structured video on how to move from exploitation to privilege escalation, the various tools that you can use. I also wanted to cover token impersonation, because that's a very important attack that a lot of people don't usually utilize or leverage, because it can give you access really easily. We've talked about dumping hashes. There's other tools that you can use to dump hashes. For example, the Windows credentials editor. I'll just cover that right now. Because it's fairly simple to use. I think I've made a video on that as well. So upload, user, share, Windows. I think it's in Windows resources, and it's under WCE, Windows credentials editor, and WCE 64. So this is in the event you're not using Meterpreter or you have a command shell session. You can actually use the Windows credentials editor, which is just a binary that allows us to list logged on user credentials. So for example, I can say, let me just get into a shell session here. And I just say WCE64.exe. And if we list out the help menu, we can list the logon sessions in NTLM credentials. So again, we can just do that now using the list option, and we get the same hashes, the NTLM hashes for the users that are currently logged on, which again is fairly simple to do. And you can also use the Mimikatz module for Meterpreter, which is again fairly simple to use. I'll just take you through the process of using it right now, because again, it's really is very simple. And what that will do is it will dump the SAM database. So I'll just go back into my Meterpreter session, and if I say load Kiwi, and that's going to load the Mimikatz, the Meterpreter Mimikatz module, and then all I need to do is say LSA. It uses the LSA dump, and we're dumping the contents of the SAM database, and we get the NTLM hashes for all the users on the system. So there's multiple ways you can do it. I'll probably also be making videos on Mimikatz individually. Now you can use it to dump credentials, and we'll also talk about Kerberos tickets and other forms of Windows authentication. But I just wanted to introduce you to a few more techniques for privilege escalation that many people ignore really, but can be very helpful. So that's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you want to join into the discussion regarding this video, you can join our forum at forum.hackersploit.org, and we can start up a discussion there. If you have any feedback, leave it in the comment section. You can always reach me via the forum or on our social networks. We're really active on Twitter. So yeah, that's going to be it for this video, and I'll be seeing you in the next video.